Where I would be starting if I was an organization, either just starting out or you're in that, pick your favorite AI, ask it to act as an evaluation specialist for nonprofits, explain what you do and get it to come up with some straightforward, like kind of impact measurement questions, either through a survey or ways in which you can kind of track your impact. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be academically, verified by a university or anything like that. But you've got to start somewhere.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Launch Plan podcast for startup, small, and growing nonprofits. This podcast is here to help you build your nonprofit from the ground up on a strong foundation. And in every episode, we give you the frameworks and the tools and all the personalized guidance that you need in order to create lasting impact. My name is Matt Stockman. I'm your host. I'm a nonprofit growth coach, and I'm thrilled that you're here at Nonprofit Launch Plan. We believe that every nonprofit has to be operating at peak performance in 6 key crucial areas in order to be successful. Those 6 areas are leadership, fundraising, marketing, programs and services, operations, and finances. So on every episode of the podcast, we talk about a topic that is core to at least one of these 6 areas. And today on the podcast, we're diving into a topic that can often feel really overwhelming for new and small nonprofits: technology, automation, and AI. My guest is David Waters. David is the CEO of Simple and Engaging, which is a company that is dedicated to helping nonprofits like yours use technology smarter to improve their impact. We had a great jam-packed conversation with lots of good takeaways in it, and I'll get more into the nuts and bolts of today's episode in just a minute. But, one of the biggest struggles for any nonprofit, especially in the early days, is around fundraising. Fundraising can be awkward and uncomfortable, mainly because for most of us, we kind of get thrown into the deep end of the fundraising pool with no floaties on and no idea how to swim in it, which can be really scary. That's why I've built the 5-step Fearless Fundraising Framework to take the fear out of asking other people to partner with you financially and to get you some more yeses early on in the journey. The Fearless Fundraising Framework is an easy-to-use workbook. It's got 5 short videos that go along with it, and it will walk you through all 5 steps. And those 5 steps are: number 1, identify the problem specifically. Number 2, position yourself as the solution. Number 3, make the ask. What would you like the individual you're sitting with or writing the email to do? Number 4 is creates a sense of urgency so they act now rather than at some point in the future. And then number 5 is the call to action. So the 5 steps: problem, solution, ask, urgency, and action. The videos and the workbook will walk you through all 5 steps, and you'll actually craft your messaging in the workbook for your nonprofit. It'll build your confidence in just knowing how to invite other people to partner with your nonprofit financially. It's absolutely free. You can get it on my website at nonprofitlaunchplan.com. Again, nonprofitlaunchplan.com. Okay, as I mentioned at the top, my guest on this episode of the podcast today is David Waters. David is the CEO of a company called Simple and Engaging, which is dedicated to helping nonprofits like yours use technology smarter to improve their impact. And in this conversation, David shares a lot of invaluable insights for organizations that are just starting out or still pretty small, really emphasizing the big idea that technology should always be purposeful and focused on solving clear, actual problems rather than just simply chasing the shiny, latest new thing. David's also going to talk a lot about mindset for approaching technology. And he's going to advocate for starting small, iterating, and prioritizing progress over perfection. And he's actually going to guide you through an exercise on identifying and mapping out some of the repetitive tasks that you or somebody on your team may be doing in order to be able to pinpoint where technology can truly help. We'll also get into talking about some affordable and accessible tech for your nonprofit, even if you're just at the beginning, stuff that's cloud-based, also freemium models, and then we're also going to talk about the impact of artificial intelligence and how to handle your data, your donors' data, and so much more. There is a lot coming up in this really important episode. Ultimately, David and I are both passionate about empowering you as a nonprofit leader to get greater efficiency and more reach through smart, budget-conscious technology solutions. So that's what today's episode is all about. Without further ado, let's jump into my conversation with David Waters, the CEO of Simple and Engaging. Tell me about your company and, in a nutshell, kind of what you do.
Yeah, sure. So we primarily work with nonprofits, helping them to use technology in smarter ways to improve their impact. So that could be anything from looking at kind of workflow automation, helping them kind of get technology to do some of the work for them, all the way through to how they collect data, how they're analyzing it, and how they're visualizing that to demonstrate their impact and improve it over time.
So for a lot of the listeners to the podcast, they are either brand new in the nonprofit journey or not even started yet. In fact, I was communicating with a listener just earlier today about the fact that they're just entertaining the idea. So you're talking to people who are, by and large, kind of at the beginning of their nonprofit journey. For a new nonprofit, it's got a small team, either one or two people tops. Where do they even sort of begin thinking about technology and automation? Like, what's their first step?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I think the answer is slightly different depending on where they are in that journey. So let's focus on the folks that have started first. A key thing is mindset around technology. So it's very easy to get caught up in the whirlwind of shiny things, new things, AI, cool features, buy this, buy this, buy this. Mindset's really important when it comes to this. Technology it's kind of useless if you don't have a clear problem to solve first. It's not an answer in of itself. Technology is and always will be an enabler to help achieve an outcome. It can't do, it's not the silver bullet. It's not going to kind of solve everyone's problem. So it's really okay to start small and iterate and really kind of focus on progress rather than, kind of getting everything right and getting everything perfect with technology beforehand. So that mindset is really, really important. So if you've just started, if you started out and you're working on your service delivery, you're working on your processes, a really great place to start is think about what are the repetitive tasks that are pulling you away from the stuff that you really enjoy doing. So this would usually be admin tasks or, depending on the systems you use, or the types of services that you're doing, it might be copying information from one place to another. Those really kind of, there's parts of everyone's job that they really don't enjoy. That's kind of the place to focus on. Start identifying what those sort of tasks look like. And that's a really, really good place to start thinking about where technology might be able to help. So a really good way to do this, and you don't need to overcomplicate this, literally just have a sheet of paper next to you. Over the course of a week, just start jotting down where you're spending your time. So in the morning, I did 2 hours of, donor outreach or whatever. I did, 3.5 hours of, analyzing this data, or 2 hours of moving data from one place to another, whatever that looks like. And then have a look at that at the end of the week and go, that's an important task, but it's not a great use of my time.
Yep.
And that helps you kind of identify where your problems might be. Pick a relatively straightforward one, and then really start trying to map out what that process looks like. So from start to finish, I do this, I click this button, I copy this here, map all of that out. Again, don't worry about what it looks like. Scribble it on a bit of paper if you want to use, Miro or something like that, an online tool to do that. You can do that too. AI can help you with that if you just, get it to ask you the questions, and it will help map out the process for you. And then that will help you look at, through that process, you'll see, okay, well, I'm spending a lot of time on steps 3, 7, and 8. And that's where technology might be able to help. So you're at least then going into the market of what technology solutions are out there with a very clear idea of, I need it to be able to fix step 3, 7, and 8. I don't want to spend so much time there. That needs to be automated. That needs to be quicker. That needs to be more efficient. So it really changes the dynamic around you going into the market looking for technology, because you're not then, having technology come to you and everyone's like, hey, look at this cool thing. Look at this feature here. It's very much more, no, this is where this is going to add value. This is it needs to be able to do this to be able to really add value to me as an individual. A note on that as well, the technology landscape, depending on where folks are coming from, the technology landscape has changed dramatically over the past sort of 10 to 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And there's three big things. Technology's never been more cheaper, easier to access, or easy to use. And there's three big things that have driven that very quickly. Cloud hosting, Google, AWS, all those guys, Microsoft built loads of data centers all around the world. So hosting's really cheap. It means software developers can build stuff really cheaply as well, which kind of gave birth to the freemium model. It enabled them to be able to do that. So you've now got these really powerful enterprise platforms that, can be really expensive if you've got huge volume, but they offer, a kind of freemium plan. So if you're really clear with the problem that you've got to solve, it might be, okay, well, actually, I can just use this, Zapier's free plan or Make.com's free plan here. And, I'll stay within their free tier limit because it just solves this one problem and you're starting to see value from that.
Right.
The other thing that's changed over the past couple of years is artificial intelligence. So that the explosion of that on the scene has made using platforms easier because a lot of platform providers are integrating into it. So you don't have to have the background necessarily on how to use the platforms. They're a lot more intuitive. But also you've got on-demand tech support now. You've got ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whatever. You can message them 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You can ask them the same question 100 times and they don't get annoyed about it. There's not that kind of fear of asking the stupid question because it's not, they're just there to answer questions. So, that's really changed the dynamic for approaching technology now. It's cheaper, it's quicker, and it's easier to use. The other thing as well is you've got you've got freemium plans. You've also got a lot of open source technology. So open source is just a fancy word for where people are building platforms that they give to the community.
Yeah.
So they'll hand over the code and you can kind of host it yourself. Sometimes you can host it on your own laptop, or you can get some kind of hosting through a hosting provider to set that up. It requires a bit of technical know-how to do that, but again, makes things a lot more accessible and a lot cheaper. There's an open source workflow automation platform called N8N, and then the number 8 and then N. Really great platform. They do their own, they do a hosted version that you can pay for, but they also do a community edition that you can download and host yourself. I've set that up on AWS's free tier, so I don't pay for it. And you wouldn't necessarily want to push massive volume through it, but it works really well. So, the situation now is you don't have to invest thousands and thousands of dollars into platforms to get an outcome. If you're clear on the problem that you're trying to solve, there's actually some really cost-effective, sometimes free, platforms that you can use that are, that can really help you solve that individual problem. And that kind of gets people over the hump of, buying a big platform, not really knowing how to use it, like, oh, I've got this cool feature, but I don't really know where it kind of fits in with what I'm doing. It can really kind of help bridge the gap there if you're really clear on what the problem is that you're looking to solve and the value that you need to get from technology.
There's I guess a certain level of fear around the big idea of artificial intelligence, especially when it comes to nonprofit data, whether it's personal data or donor data as well, and just using tools that accidentally we're exposing donor data to an AI tool, just in the whole desire of trying to be more cost effective or more streamlined or whatever. Can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing to acknowledge is that and that fear is perfectly valid. There is, literally over the weekend, there was a massive data breach with an airline that I've used before, and they've now all of my details are out in the world, right? And that's not even AI related. So data security, data privacy, data protection is really important. So it's a very responsible thing to do, to be considering that as a nonprofit. You're the steward of that information, right? You're in control of it. The way that I would encourage people to think about this is there's two sides to this coin that you need to consider. The first is how and where the data is processed, and the second is what data you put in. So let's pick up the first one.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about how data is processed, so if you use ChatGPT, if you use their free version as an example, what they're going to do is they're going to take the conversations, they're going to take the information, they're going to feed that back into their language model to help try and improve it. So, anything that you put in there is going to get fed back into it. A lot of the platforms have that model. What has been released over the past couple of years, which is super interesting, is the idea of locally hosted open source AI platforms. So AI platforms that you files, obviously, and you can host them. The smaller models you can run on your laptop. So there's a really cool app you can download called GPT-4All, for the number 4 and then all. And what you can do with that is you can load that onto your laptop. You can download a large language model, an open source one, and run it completely offline. So the data never leaves your laptop. You don't even need to be connected to the internet. I've used it on planes because I'm like, I need to do a bit of work and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The downside with those is obviously they're smaller, less powerful models. So you need to be mindful. That's the trade-off that you're making. They do offer, there's much more powerful open source models that you can download, but you'd have to pay to host them. That can get quite expensive. AI models are quite resource intensive, so it can get quite expensive to run. But that's an option if you absolutely want to put a concrete wall around your data and how AI uses it.
Yep.
You've got that option there. The other side of it is the likes of Claude and Gemini and ChatGPT. They offer more expensive plans where they make the promise that they don't feed your information back into the model to do that. I'm still a little bit skeptical around that. So I think you've got to put, a slight grain of salt with that when they say that, but that's another option. So, on that side of the coin is kind of what do you, how is your data going to be processed? The other side of the coin is what data are you going to be putting in there? So, you can kind of break it into 3 groups. So publicly available information. So if you're feeding in, if you're a nonprofit and you're feeding in the text from your homepage and you want it to optimize it, make it better, it's all publicly available information. The large language models already have access to that. It's kind of out there in the world. So
right. You
don't need to worry about that. Sensitive data. So this might be, you have a unique process around how you do something, or some commercially sensitive information. You just need to be thinking about how you're anonymizing that data. So don't include your company name, don't include names. You can still utilize the language models, but, kind of keep keep the detail a little bit higher so you as an individual company can't be identified. So the third bucket is personal data. And that's where it starts getting a little bit kind of a little bit fishier, a bit more complex. AI models are actually getting quite good at analyzing data. So you can feed it a spreadsheet, export data out somewhere, feed it a spreadsheet. It'll give you trends. It will tell you kind of what to look for and spit out some visualizations and stuff. Really useful. But before you do any of that, if you've got names, email addresses, personal details, delete all of that. If you still need to have some sort of link to a record, use like an alphanumeric code or some sort of record ID, something that means nothing to the AI, nothing. If they did look at that record that they're looking at, they've got no idea who it is, where it's from, or anything like that. So yeah, you've got your kind of your different buckets of information there. Now, I think a large portion of this really depends on your own personal level of comfort. So again, with this, start small, kind of build out what your comfort level is with stuff. And it all depends on the types of information that you're processing. I'm doing some work with a women's organization in Australia at the moment. They deal a lot with domestic violence. Obviously their systems have lots of case notes, some, pretty kind of, sensitive and tough information. Doesn't go anywhere near an AI.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you really kind of compartmentalize out the data that it needs that you need it to look at, or what you want it to do with it to make sure that matches. The The key though is AI is not going anywhere. It's not a fad. It's not a trend. This is how, organizations are going to continue to move forward. So I think, those organizations that are launching with AI at their core, not necessarily it's used for everything, but, they're considering AI and how they do things. They're going to have an advantage over those that don't. So I think it's really important that you're considering what that looks like and start building out an AI policy. It doesn't need to be overcomplicated. Make a living document that you change over time as the technology changes, just to kind of reflect that. What's your level of comfort with what goes into AI? And that should always be driven by the outcome that you're looking to achieve. So, for example, if you were looking to use AI to really hyper-personalize your donor outreach, you might, there's information that might not necessarily need to be fed into the AI to be able to drive that personalization. Probably don't need their name. You probably don't need their exact address. You probably don't need, you could probably just get away with postcode or state or whatever that, kind of looks like.
Right.
Zip code, sorry, for the US. So yeah, it's being really mindful about what outcome you're trying to achieve, and therefore what information do you feed into it.
That's really good. For a new nonprofit leader, can you give a couple of more just kind of practical examples of things that your company has done in the early parts of the journey with them to break the ice and get them acclimated and thinking about using the tools and automation and technology in order to create better processes for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think they broadly fall into two camps. So one is, how can you be more efficient? So how can you cut out some of the processing time? And then the other side is, how can you do more of what what adds value to your beneficiaries or your program or your donors, and expand that out to more people? So on the scale part, we've done a lot of work with different organizations where, and typically you see this with nonprofits who work with corporates and other organizations where they're looking to help them improve their practices. So I've worked with some organizations that's around culture or diversity, equity, inclusion, or kind of how they are supporting their employees, or loads of different stuff. And each of these organizations will usually have some sort of an assessment framework, some way in which they're able to say, okay, based on what your organization's doing, you're here, and kind of best practices up here, and this is how we're going to help you get to what that looks like. A lot of organizations that I've worked with and have been doing that very manually. So they'll be collecting information, surveys or interviews or whatever that looks like. Then they go away, they have a look at the information, they're like, okay, this means you're here. And then they, will provide some feedback back to the organization as to what that means and what they need to do next. Great work, really, really useful, but very, very, manual, limited by what they're able to do. So, we've done this with a couple of organizations in Australia, one in the UK, one in the US, where we said, okay, how can we automate that process? So let's break that down. So data collection, data gets, through the survey, we push that into a database. We apply the logic that you're applying to analyze what that means. So they get a score here. It means this score, this score means this, or maybe it's a combination of scores. And then we can generate automatically, and this happens within about kind of 45 to 50 seconds from when the person submits the response, automatically generate a report that tells them what that means. So it's just meant that these organizations have been able to go from, we'll maybe be able to do that with 20 to 30 partners a year, to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1,000 organizations.
Sure.
And it's really hands off. It means they can focus more on what does this mean for you, which is where the real impact comes, not just telling them where they're at. So that's been super interesting, because what initially the organizations, the nonprofits that I've worked with that I've done this see is they're like, great, that's awesome. We get to, expand out what we're doing and we can reach more people. What they don't think about, which kind of comes a couple of months in, is they're collecting all of this data. So they're now getting, this big database of information about where the different corporate partners are at, where their beneficiaries are at, or whatever that kind of looks like. So you can start doing an analysis on that to identify macro trends, to understand kind of where do we need to be going, next. Everyone has this bit as their biggest problem. Let's focus our training, our programs, our service, or whatever that looks like, to try and uplift that. And you're starting to track your impact in not necessarily the most robust way, but you're starting to get an indication of the impact that you're happening over time, which is where, for me, I geek out about this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's where I find this stuff sort of really interesting.
Well, impact measurement obviously is the most important KPIs, I guess, for any nonprofit, is just being able to get a trend line as to like what kind of a difference are you actually making. So any tools that can start to illustrate that for leaders is great.
Yeah, and there's some really cool, again, free tools that you can use that are out there to do that. I think the bit that I'm seeing, particularly with smaller nonprofits, is they're not evaluation experts, they're not social impact measurement experts, and that's fair. They shouldn't be, but the expectation still is from funders, from the broader community, is that they're still going to be able to do that. Where I would be starting if I was an organization, either just starting out or you're in that, pick your favorite AI, ask it to act as an evaluation specialist for nonprofits, explain what you do, and get it to come up with some straightforward, like, kind of impact measurement questions, either through a survey or ways in which you can kind of track your impact. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be academically verified by a university or anything like that. But you've got to start somewhere. And the trend that I'm seeing, and this is probably more with established nonprofits, so it's a bit of a warning to those that are just starting off, is because they've got this idea in their head that it needs to be perfect. It needs to tick every single box. It needs to be academically verified. They don't do anything. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of in this box of like, I'm not going to measure any impact because I can't do it perfectly, so I don't do anything. And that's not a great way to go. It's all about kind of incremental progress. Because that sort of information is what helps you communicate your impact. It's what helps you gather more support, be it financial or otherwise, for the work that you're doing. So you've got it. It's better to start and then iterate on that and build on it over time, rather than kind of just put it to one side and we'll pick that up one day when we can pay an expensive consultant to do it for us.
Yeah, that's really important for all of us to hear. I think I have to believe, David, that the point where you encounter people from time to time and you end up with clients is after a nonprofit has maybe made some less than awesome decisions when it comes to technology, and then they come to you to sort of go, David, help us unravel the mess we've gotten ourselves into. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like and how people can avoid it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the conversations range from, we've just got stuff everywhere. Like, there's just data everywhere. We've got platforms everywhere. We're not really too sure kind of what this all means. I'm doing some work with an organization in Australia there. They've got they brought in a social impact consultant to build out their impact framework, and they've got some kind of surveys there and to do that. But they've got all this other data and all the other systems that they work with, and they're like, what does any of it mean? So we're doing a bit of an audit for them to help them understand that. The kind of drivers that I find people come to me with a conversation, it falls into one of three buckets. One is, we're drowning. We've grown, we're not keeping up. We want to use technology to help us, be able to do a bit more with the resources that we've got. The second is, okay, we've got some funding to do something specifically. That needs to involve some technology, and we want to understand what that looks like. Or the third part is, like I mentioned, we've just got, it's
all over the place. It's spilling out everywhere. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
What I typically don't get, and I think there's a bit of a missed opportunity here, is the organizations that are starting out to get, like, how should we be thinking about technology? Where should we be starting? And I think it's, a really important part around that, and it goes back to my earlier point, is just technology should always be purposeful. There should be a reason why you're using specific platforms. There should be a reason why you've decided to do things in a certain way, and that can be as straightforward as just keeping a bit of an inventory of the platforms that you're using, right? It's really easy, like, just $5 a month here, I'll just use that for this. So just keeping a very, very simple spreadsheet of, we've got a subscription to, or a free or paid subscription to Google Workspace. What do we use that for? What's the primary purpose of that? So that as you're kind of building out your tech stack, you're aware of what you're already kind of paying for and making sure there's no overlap. I see that all the time where organizations buy two platforms that largely do the same thing, but it's just been sold to them slightly different, right? So it's like, oh no, I use this for this and this for this. That has the same functionality. Right. So
it's like you're reading my email, man.
yeah. And the interesting thing is the other thing you can do with that inventory, this takes a bit of time, and it's something consultants could do as well. But you could go through that list, particularly the ones you're paying for, and see if there's any cheaper or free alternatives that can do the same job. There's always the one asterisk I put with that. There's always a cost to moving platform, whether it be, not necessarily financial cost, but there's always a cost to moving platform. But, there's some really good options out there. So for example, a lot of people, Adobe have, a fantastic Photoshop suite of editing tools and stuff like that. There's open source platforms you can download to your laptop. It's called Photopea, I think, that has very, very similar functionality. Download it, it's free, it's all open source, and has very, very similar functionality. So it's things like that to think about, how you can kind of compare the two to try and lower your tech costs. It's particularly when the economy is biting like it is at the moment.
Yeah.
And, market conditions are like they are. Tech's actually one of the areas that's slightly easier to try and find some cost savings, either through we don't need to use that platform anymore, or is there an alternative that we can use? If folks do get into that sort of space, I'd check out, there's a website called alternative2.net, where you type in the existing software you're using, and it will come up with some paid, freemium and open source alternatives where they're available. So just gives you a bit of an opportunity to find some alternatives if they're available. So there's a way to kind of approach that as you start getting bigger. So that's kind of as you're starting out. Keep costs low, keep it simple. As you start getting bigger, that's where you probably need to start thinking about data strategies and kind of, how your tech stack will work together and things like that. Gets a little bit more complicated. But that's, as long as you're taking a modular approach to technology, it's not the one system that's going to rule them all. It's easier to kind of plug and play different things into each other, and platforms are much more designed now and much more robust to be able to work with each other. I hate this word, the interoperability between the two is far easier and higher than it ever has been in history. So
let me sort of land things here. This conversation's been really enlightening. It feels to a certain degree that if we were to come back in 6 months or whatever and check in again, that everything is changing so quickly. It's hard to know how to keep my finger on the pulse of anything. So talk a little bit about just staying current with the tools and the trends without getting overwhelmed. Like, how do you navigate that without getting buried in the weeds of it?
And it's really tough. There's a lot of content out there, because of the way that our social media networks are designed. It's all very clickbaity. Here's the must-have. Here's the, if you're not doing this, then you're gonna, you're not going to exist as an organization, all of that sort of stuff. None of that is new, though. It's just there's more of it. The proliferation of that sort of news is there. Non-profit leaders, particularly those starting out, take that load off your back a little bit. You're not expected to be a tech expert. You know, you've started what you've done because you wanted to make a difference in the world. You've got expertise in that specific area, or a really strong passion towards that. It's not fair to expect you to be on top of it all. There's always going to be a shiny new tool. There's always going to be a new new fad, a new trend. There's a couple of good folks on LinkedIn who are posting about this sort of stuff. A small plug for my own feed.
I was going to say David Waters is one of them.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people doing it. So I think it's about finding folks that speak the same language as you and something that you can really align with. What I would encourage folks to do though is, take the pressure off of expecting to know exactly what's going out in the world, how technology is changing, all of that sort of stuff. Put the most of that effort into understanding your own organization, how it works, where, kind of issues are, and let that lead your investigation into tech rather than the other way around. Because the moment that you start trying to bring tech in without a clear problem, it's where you're going to be spending money on stuff where you're not going to see the value. So, as an example, you might look at, okay, we're getting 500 inquiries a week through our website from our beneficiaries, and it's answering some of the similar questions all at the same time. What's a way that we could solve that? Obviously the answer will lead to an artificial intelligence powered solution in one way, shape or form, but that's a better way to approach the market to find out what's going on, because you've got a very specific problem to solve. It's not a cool, sexy approach. It's not, kind of getting into kind of, the latest pieces. But, most of, and hopefully people take this as a source of solace, not criticism. Most of the organizations that I speak to, their level of technology maturity is still quite low. The idea of automation is quite, quite kind of out there and advanced for them. So, it's about kind of making sure that you've got a clear understanding of what your organization is trying to achieve, what that specific process is trying to achieve, the problem that you're trying to solve, and then looking to see how technology can solve that, not the other way around. And that's where I see the biggest mistakes are made, is shiny, cool thing. Great. Let's buy that. Let's change our processes. And what usually happens is most people just keep doing it the same way they did before.
Right.
Oh yeah, our CRM's over here, but I've got like this spreadsheet over here that I still use. Kind of makes that investment, especially given how tight money is for a lot of nonprofit folks at the moment. Every cent counts, right? So it's making sure that you're getting the most out of that.
To sort of encapsulate what you said, making sure that whatever decisions you make about technology and use of technology and software platforms and AI, et cetera, make sure that you start with what problem are we trying to solve, rather than what did my friend down the street, what did they just put on their website? Like, we need one of those. Like, stop thinking that way and just think about, what problems do we need to solve? What things can we be more efficient at? And then go search for tools, rather than find tools and go, well, nonprofits use this, so we should probably try to figure out a way to use it too.
Yeah, spot on. And it, a classic example that I've seen more times than I care to admit is, folks be like, we need a chatbot on our website. So they go away, they build it, or get a company to build it and that kind of stuff. And they don't get a lot of traffic to their website, so it doesn't get used. A chatbot's not going to change the fact that your website's not getting a lot of hits.
Right.
So the actual problem to solve is, how do we get more people going to our website?
Right.
Then how do we deal with it when it gets there?
Right.
So it's, but it's a cool, again, it's a cool, sexy thing to launch, right? Like, new chatbot, wow. It's that kind of approach. So I do see that far too often, unfortunately, but it's, and it's a lot of time, a lot of effort, and in some cases a fair bit of financial investment that is kind of poured down the drain.
Yeah. So. How do people get in touch with you if a nonprofit leader is listening who'd like to learn more and maybe talk to you more in depth about the problems that they're trying to solve with technology? Walk us through what the next steps look like.
Yeah, chuck up the bat signal. I'll find you. Follow me on LinkedIn if you want. If you want to just kind of follow my content, keep up to date with kind of some of the stuff that we're talking about. We post I post a lot of content on there that's very much around kind of what's happening in the industry, some advice, some guidance. And then the odd tool to kind of use that might be of use. If you're interested in contacting me directly, my email address is I'm sure we can put this in the podcast notes as well. David@simpleandengaging.com. I'm always happy to have a chat with any folks that are trying to grapple with this sort of stuff. Much to my accountant's dismay, I'm not a very pushy, hard salesperson. So always happy to have a conversation, always happy to try and point you in the right direction. If that's us helping you, great, awesome. That's a win-win for everyone. If it's not, very happy to point you in the direction of other ways that you might be able to do that. And that's kind of regardless of your budget. Again, it's kind of a bit of a common myth that technology is very expensive, that, months to deploy, that kind of stuff. Regardless of your budget, there's always something that can be done. So, as an example, we had a very small nonprofit. I think it was 2 part-time people and then a handful of volunteers. They actually came to me asking if I knew any good grant writers. And I do. I said, what's sort of your budget? And they're like, we don't really have one. And I said, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Do you have, is it an issue with the quality, or, is it an issue with, just getting them done? What are you trying to say? Do you want to save your time? And they're like, well, it's quality. We're happy to put the time in. We're just, we need to improve the quality. So I ran a really small workshop with them, really low cost, $200. How can you use AI to help you with that? And just kind of upskill their team on using some of the free AI tools, with that particular use case in mind. So happy to do stuff like that all the way up to, some of our biggest projects have been, tens of thousands of dollars. So it really depends on the scope, but there's always something that can be done. It's never the case that, even if you don't have much or any budget, that there's nothing you can do in the technology landscape that can help.
What a great conversation with David Waters from Simple and Engaging, with what I believe is going to be a lot of great insight that you can actually start to implement today in your nonprofit to make the whole idea of technology and processes and systems and AI less scary. All the links to the things that we talked about are in this episode's show notes. And again, if you'd like to get in touch with David, you can find him on LinkedIn. Just search David J. Waters, W-A-T-T, 2 T's, E-R-S, or check out his website, simpleandengaging.com, and his contact information is in the show notes too. Now, before we wrap up the episode, the vision for Nonprofit Launch Plan, this podcast, my coaching business, is to empower 10,000 nonprofits worldwide that each commit to impacting at least 10,000 people, so that together we improve the lives of 100 million people globally. I mean, even saying that is a mouthful. I'm calling this the 100 Million Impact Initiative. If you've heard me talk about vision statements before, this is a big vision statement. It's aspirational and inspiring. Hopefully when you hear it, you say, yeah, I want to be a part of that. It's future-oriented. It's not going to happen anytime soon. It may go on beyond my lifetime even. It's clear and concise. It's just one sentence. And a good vision statement for you as a leader should scare you a little bit. This one scares the daylights out of me. So my question to you is, do you want to join? Do you want your nonprofit to be a part of the 100 Million Impact Initiative? No doubt you're listening to this podcast because you've got a dream for a nonprofit, or you're part of a nonprofit that is growing, or you're hoping it will grow, and you're just trying to get some practical insight along the way. And what is driving you is a desire to see people's lives changed. And my dream and desire is to come alongside you and help you with tools and insights and expertise that will help you reach at least 10,000 people with the impact that your nonprofit is meant to make. So my question is, if that's your dream for your nonprofit, will you join with me in the 100 Million Impact Initiative? I just want to be able to count your nonprofit as part of the community that we're building together, the community of impact makers and world changers. So if you're in, just drop me an email that says I'm in, and you'll instantly be a part of the community of nonprofits that we're growing. It's free, just like the podcast is free. If you get value from the podcast, then I would just love for you to join the 100 Million Impact Initiative. It's not a business thing. It's just about us uniting together to start tracking the impact on the world that we're making together and to help each other do it more effectively. So that's it for this episode of the Nonprofit Launch Plan podcast for startups, small and growing nonprofits. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next episode. And if in some way or another you found this episode to be helpful, please share it with another nonprofit leader who you think might benefit. Until next time, keep making a difference, and thanks for listening.